We all want to be more persuasive, more influential. I mean, every day there is someone that you want to convince about something. Today, you have the chance to learn about that important skill, the skill of convincing, the skill of influencing, the skill of persuading. Um, from that important skill, and it's an important skill, especially for us as leaders, you're going to get the chance to learn about that from two experts from completely different worlds. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be with us live for future episodes on your favorite social channel. We have two ways that you can find out when those are taking place so you can join us. You can sign up and join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups to get all of that info and some other stuff too. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get all that insider info and find out when we're doing these live in the future. Today's episode is brought to you by our Remarkable Master Classes. Pick from one of 13 important life and leadership skills to help you become a more effective, productive, and confident leader while overcoming some of a leader's toughest challenges. You can learn more at remarkablemasterclass.com. Our guests today, and yes, it's guests. I'm going to have them join me now. Here they are. Let me introduce them to you. My guests today are Adele Gambardella and Chip Massey. They are co-founders of the company, The Convincing Company, a crisis communications and training firm, and the co-authors of Convince Me, High Stakes Negotiation Tactics to Get Results in Any Business Situation. Adele owned an award-winning PR agency in Washington, D.C. for 15 years, where she served as a spokesperson for a variety of Fortune 100 companies, including DuPont, Deutsche Bank, Lockheed Martin, SAP, and Verizon. She's also served as a PR strategist, corporate counsel, and crisis management for clients that include the United Nations, Facebook, Johnson & Johnson, and President Biden. She has taught crisis communications and business at Princeton, Cornell, George Mason, and Georgetown, and is a contributor to the Wall Street Journal and Entrepreneur magazine. Chip is a former FBI hostage negotiator and special agent. In his 22-year career at the Bureau, he has led high-profile cases, spearheaded the New York FBI's Office of Crisis Negotiations teams, and won the prestigious FBI Directors Award. And today, now you guys can add to your bio that you've been on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. How about that? But listen, I'm so glad that you guys are here. And we've got, oh yes, Mr. Josh is here from Dayton, Ohio. We've got other people joining us. Pam is joining us from Arizona. We've got an unnamed person saying good morning. At least we know that they're in the U.S. Listen, I'm so glad you guys are here. And we chatted a little bit before we started, and I think we're going to have a fabulous conversation. But tell us very briefly, and Adele, you told me a little bit about this before we started, but tell us the very quick version of how you end up writing a book together. What's the journey to the book?
So real quick, the whole thing was when I met Adele, it was at an entrepreneurial dinner. And we started, it was one of those things, Kevin, where it's small group and you're going around, you're introducing yourselves. And, after I heard what Adele did in crisis communications and PR and so forth, I said, well, that's close to what I did. And so we started talking. And Adele said, I think there's more here that would make sense for us to keep in contact. We kept talking. And that was August, about 5 years ago. And so Adele just kept asking me questions about what I learned at Quantico, how I applied it in the field, what was hostage negotiations like, and just kept building up the information. She said, okay, we have enough now. I said, enough for what? She said, we're going to put on a masterclass. It's going to be in 3 months. We're going to have it in New York City. I say, what? And that's what happened. That's how Adele moves. I wasn't used to that kind of mindset, Kevin. It was, for me, it was very, government oriented, very methodical. You're going to move through things. You're going to investigate all angles. No. And darn if she didn't sold that thing out. 250 people came, and then COVID hit. So our in-person stuff was done. And so Adele said, we're writing a book. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why we're here today with you.
What you're saying, Chip, is that Adele convinced you, is what you're saying. That's
Yes,
what you're saying.
sir.
So,
All day.
and,
All
and
day.
so uh, I used a couple of other words in the intro, and I did it on purpose. So, the subtitle of the book has the word negotiation in it, but there's a bunch of words that we often put together. I didn't look to see if they're all exactly synonyms, but negotiation, influence, persuasion, those all sound pretty good. Manipulation, like, let's just get that out of the way right off the bat, because all of us want to be influential and most of us don't want to manipulate. So, like, let's just talk about what we are talking about here and what we're not talking about here. Can we do that?
We can, but here's the thing about the manipulation term, right? I think that it's important distinction to say you can use tools for good or for evil, right? And it really is how you use the tools that you're aware of that make the big difference. You could use a hammer to build a house or break a window. It is your choice, right? So it is so important to figure out what your goals are, but also to have the tools in the toolbox. There's this, there was this great study that we did that we found as a result of writing the book, which is most people are as convincing as they are going to be their entire life at age 6.
I thought it was 5 when I read it, but 6. Okay.
So if you sulked on the playground and got your friends to do what you wanted to do, likely if you're a manager, you're going to sulk to get your employees to do what you want to do. We don't really develop beyond age 6 because, whatever works for us has worked for us for a long time, and we're nervous to try new things. And so we just go back to the things that have always worked. And if they don't work, we blame the other person. We say that person's a jerk. They don't like me. They don't understand me. They don't get it, right? We blame someone else, not thinking maybe it's us. Maybe our approach is off. Maybe.
What? It might be us? I've tried something 17 times. There are 17 people that were wrong, Adele.
Right? So, that's the thing. Most of us do not try new things. And so we really set out to create a very practical, implementable book where these strategies will make you more convincing. They will make you more persuasive. And yeah, if you wanted to manipulate people, you could probably do it with the stuff in this book, but you probably shouldn't. And what is your purpose? And think about what your purpose is when you're trying to persuade someone. So long answer.
It's certainly my hope that if you're watching this or listening to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, that your goal isn't to manipulate, not to do things that are only to your advantage and not to the advantage of others. Right. So I'm glad we got that out of the way. Thank you. That was for me as much as for anybody. One of the things that you talk about in the book, and I'm just going to tell everybody that this is a great book, and I recommend it highly. And there's no way we can talk about all the stuff that's in it. Like, we can't, right? So we're picking the stuff Kevin wants to ask more questions about, right? And the things that, so that's where we're headed. They don't know where I'm headed, but I'm going to just share a few things, and we'll talk about a few things here for the next 30 minutes or 30 minutes or so. So you talk about the fact that there are 4 parts to effective convincing. So just walk us through, you can't teach us the whole master class, but walk us through each of the 4 briefly. I'll pop them up on the screen as you come up with them. So let's do that now. If we want to be a better convincer, what are the 4 parts of that play a role in helping that happen?
Yeah. So number 1 is forensic listening, which is the art and science of analyzing a conversation after it happens, because we believe words leave clues. The second part is the getting to someone's unstated narrative. What do they believe about you, but they are not willing to tell you? We all walk around with different tapes in our heads about who you are, who we want you to believe we are, and we're not always honest about what it is and who it is we want you to think about. The next thing is targeted validation. So that is the idea of understanding where someone has the most energy, where they're most passionate, where they're most enthusiastic, and figuring out how to validate them about those points so that they can become better. And then the last thing is bringing someone down a convincing continuum. And that is, that is what the long and short of it is, never starting with your strongest point first. But we could go into.
I want to go more about that in a few minutes, but I want you to talk a little bit more about targeted validation, because like we all sort of know we want to be validated, we understand that at some level. But Chip, what are you talking about when you talk about targeted validation? So like right now, you guys are observing me. You have been for about 20 minutes, which is just a little bit unnerving, just saying, especially with Chip on the call here. But like, what when you talk about targeted validation, what do you mean? Say a little bit more about that, Chip.
Sure. And so it can be used in two different senses, is what we describe. Now, the first is that, just like Adele set up, and you know this all too well, Kevin, working in leadership training, is that we go around through life so often and we don't hear anything good about our performance. It's always, here's where you dropped the ball. Here's where you could have done better. Here's where you could have picked up the other end of that. You know, you left some money on the table. You know, rare is it that in our lives, in our work lives, that do we ever hear, hey, this was a really good job you did, and here are the 5 things as to why it was. So that is like the idea of, you know, instead of being the micromanager that is always on top of people, why not be the micromanager that's always validating where you can, you know, catch people doing good, as the saying goes.
Mm-hmm.
And the second way of targeted validation that we advise for people is that, you know, a person might come to you, like Kevin, when you talk to executives, and when we do, we often see a bundle of things, and we could say that maybe 96% in that bundle we don't like, but there is that 4% that we would like to grow and pull out. So what we're going to do is we're going to validate those things. You know, they might have done some horrible management leadership interaction, but dag nabbit, if you can find that one thing, pull it out and say, you know, right here in this meeting, I noticed when Mark was being attacked just mercilessly, and you came to his aid. And I got to tell you, it made an impact on me, and it made an impact on my entire team. And we know that you have our back. Now, they could be a horrible manager everywhere else and everything else they're doing, right? But if you pull that thing out, show it to them, validate that, what's going to happen in that person? They're going to want to grow that, because they're going to want to keep you in that kind of loop of validating them.
It's going to be repeatable. So I have to say, Chip, I believe on episode number 437, it's the first time the word dag nabbit has been used on this podcast. So I just got to start there. And the other thing that I want to say is that you're telling us all that, and I'm reminded of a story in the book about, I believe his name was Marco, who is like, I don't know, he was a gang criminal. He was a criminal, and he was in prison for like 8 lifetimes or something. But right. You were able to have a valuable conversation with him because of targeted validation, and you spent some time going back and looking at his past. Give us like 30 seconds on that, because it was such a great story, and it's where I went to when you started talking about this.
Sure. And the whole thing with Marco, got just like Kevin said, is that, you know, 8 murders on him. He was an enforcer for a cartel, and he was not going out of prison. He was there until he died. So he had information that we needed to use on another investigation that another squad needed. So I was sent with another agent to try to see if he would give us any information at all. Well, I'm thinking, going into prison, the idea there, it's very transactional. You know, you give, I give, you know, kind of thing. It's what most people call a negotiation. So I'm going in already with that mindset. And so when we sit down, and the setup for Marco, by the way, guys, is that he comes in that room and he's owning that room. I mean, he's in control in the way he's presenting himself. His hair is perfect, not one piece of hair out of place. His orange jumpsuit looks like it was just pressed. That's how he appears. He sits down calmly and looks at us, and we start the conversation. And as I begin the first words, Kevin, he looks up and to the right over my shoulder. So I'm presenting him with different kind of things, still up and to the right. I'm saying, we could improve your cell. We could move you across the country so you could be closer to family, up and to the right, not saying anything. This went on for about 20 or so minutes. And finally, you know, our time is coming to an end. And I said, well, listen, Marco, you know, it doesn't look like that this was anyone's good use of time. We're going to go now. And as I'm thinking about and getting ready to get up and realizing I'm going to face a complete, loss here and have to explain to people why I could not get any information. I was thinking about, the investigation that we did beforehand, his records, all his files, the tapes that we had of him, videos, and went through all that and how he was appearing just now. And then I said in the moment, I said, as we're getting ready to leave, I said, listen, I just want to say one thing to you. While I can't ever condone anything that you've done in these murders and the way you moved, I can tell you that every action that you took within that organization resulted in the growth of that cartel, and that you increased their coffers, you grew their territory in every way. So from that standpoint, I just have to tell you, respect. And I'm getting ready to leave. And that's
everybody, 4%, 96%.
Yeah, there, right. And right at that point, I hear his voice. He says, hold up, sit down, and ask me your questions again. And I did. And he became animated. He became like this extraordinary teller of information and facts. And I figured it out. And mind you, Kevin, we didn't give him one thing, not one thing. The only
you did.
thing
You gave him validation.
I did, right. And also within that, wrapped in that, Kevin, is the unstated narrative, that disconnect between what people believe about you and what they're actually going to tell you and the way they see themselves in the world. And Marco saw himself now in the prison confines as a consultant. He wanted to be seen as a business person that knew how to get results. And so once I gave him that respect, that validation, he became a completely different person in terms of providing information. So that's the Marco story.
So there you go. There's a whole bunch of those kind of stories in the book, everybody. So I've got several things I want to talk about. You hinted at, Adele, at a couple of things that I want to go back to. And actually, I want to go to it now. I think there's a connection to the Marco story. At least there is in my own head, which may or may not be accurate. But I want to talk a little bit more about, because you mentioned it, Adele, forensic listening. We all have heard of active listening, and we're at my belief is all of us are really good at it sometimes and really not good at it most of the time. Like, we all know how to be active listeners. We've all done it. But you're suggesting something more, something that happens after the exchange has happened, something called forensic listening. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is really Chip's expertise. So, Chip, can you jump in and talk about forensic listening?
Adele knows it well, but I'll throw it out here. The idea is that it is the art and science of analyzing a conversation after it's happened. So just like you set it up, Kevin, active listening in process while it's happening right there, and used primarily for de-escalation purposes, getting somebody from a 10 to a 5 to a 1. Well, forensic listening is realizing that after you have a conversation, there is a gold mine of information that person has shared with you, whether that's a prospective client, current client, a boss, supervisor, direct report, a team, whatever that is. If you can go through a conversation and then figure out from a standpoint, we recommend people take notes from 4 areas, and that's emotion, theme development, body positioning, and voice, your pitch, tone, and cadence. So in the emotion, you are going to attach, okay, that person's talking to me and I'm sensing where they're excited, where they're kind of down, where there's a gap, right, Kev? And then you're going to also look at what it is, their themes are they developing. What the thing, if they repeat it more than once, it's important to them. So it should be.
Can I stop you just for a second?
Please.
So we often talk about communicate. There's 3 parts to communication, right? Message sent, received, and understood. And that we send messages in 3 ways. And all of those are inside of here.
Yeah.
And the obvious way we send messages is in the words that we say, the words themselves, right? And one of those, that's the themes. But all of the rest of how our message is received is in vocal and visual. And so 3 of the 4 things that you're talking about here are in the vocal and visual, not in the actual verbal words. That just strikes me as such an important thing, because so often as the speaker, we think it's all about our words, but the reality is that's the least important ultimately of the 3.
It's true. And if you go into a meeting and you do this type of deep forensic listening, you will be so far ahead of any of your peers because no one is listening at this level, right? Even if you have like Otter AI going in the background, which is a program you can get, right? I mean, it's pretty inexpensive. And you have that going in the background, but you are taking notes on a piece of paper like this, just jotting down, like this person got excited, right? With a pen. This person got excited. This person got excited when they said this. They got animated. Their body positioning seemed, they were leaning in. They were more engaged. Their voice took a different tone and pitch and cadence when they talked about something. It's just so important that we listen at this level. And if you are then able, if the one skill you take from watching this, live, if you take this one skill and you apply this in your everyday business, you are going to be so much more convincing than anyone else. Because essentially what you're going to do is you're going to take this data that you get, quick data, and you're going to wait. You're not going to do this right away. You're not going to use targeted validation right away, but you're going to wait. Maybe even wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the road. And then you're going to go and have another meeting with that person. I mean, that's how business is. It's not like we meet every single day. It is really a series of meetings. Mm-hmm. And you are going to refer to all 4 of these things in this quadrant. And you are going to get someone so excited that you paid attention at that level that you're going to get invited to every meeting. You're going to be the person they ask back. You are going to be the person they believe in because you have listened at a level. I mean, like, how many times in the course of our career has anyone complimented us 3 weeks after we had a meeting? It wasn't like, Kevin, that thing that you said at that meeting when you were talking about leadership development, it really made an impact on me. It really changed the way I viewed the world. And, I told my team about it. And here's the things that we did that increased my business and my cause. You never get that. You never get that. It's like we all can do it on one hand. How many times we've heard that in our career? And so it's really huge. I mean, you do that one thing, you're going to be so much better than anyone else.
So I told you all to start that there's no way we would get to everything in the book, and we're not going to. But what I am going to do now is I'm going to read a quote from the book. I'm not going to ask them to tell me what's at the top of page 59. I'm going to read what's at the top of page 59 because it's about this idea. It's in the section about the convincing continuum. But I'm just going to read this line because I think everyone who's watching or listening needs to hear and understand this. And I'll let you guys sort of expand on it after that. Here it is. You may have truth on your side, but persuasion does not hinge on what is true. It's about what the person you are trying to convince believes is true. This is the key factor in understanding how far to push people down the convincing continuum. If you don't know where they stand, try asking open-ended questions. So one of you want to talk to that? Because I think it's such an important point. And so often it goes back to what we did at 6. Well, we know it's right, so we just keep pounding on that point. It's like the 2 people on, and pick your channel, everybody. Fox, CNN, I don't care which one you pick. And we got 3 of us, but there's 2 of them side by side. That's what they're both doing. There's no convincing going on. There's no communication going on, but they just keep talking louder, right? So talk to that. Chip looked like you were handing that to Adele.
I am, yes.
Well, one of the things is, when I started out as my career as a journalist, I worked for George Magazine, so John F. Kennedy Jr.'s publication, and he was honestly one of the most convincing people I've ever met in my entire career. He's a fascinating individual. But one of the things, when you think about the convincing continuum, is you never want to start with your strongest point first. As a journalist, you literally start with an inverted pyramid, which is here's all my most important things, the who, what, where, when, and why. Get that done in the lead, and then the least important things get further down the article. And with convincing, it's actually the exact opposite. You have to start with your point of agreement. Because if you start with your strongest point first, all you're going to do is make the other person go, well, I believe what I believe. I'm going to dig my heels in, and they're not going to be open to anything else you say beyond that first point. And so to be persuasive, you've got to start at the point of agreement. Now, to understand what your point of agreement is, you probably had to have been practicing forensic listening, right? Getting to someone's unstated narrative. What do they really want you to believe about them? And then practicing targeted validation. And then when you do meet them and you are trying to convince them and you are trying to take them down the convincing continuum, you know what your point of agreement is. And when you know what your point of agreement is, you can slowly move them down the continuum, unfreezing their cognitive biases, as it's called, right? And then you use something called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. What are their fears about what it is they don't know? What is their uncertainty around what it is they don't know around the topic? What is their doubt? What are their doubts? What are their fears, right? And if you can focus in on those things, you take them just so far. And here's the thing, you take them just so far, but you have to stop. And it takes discipline to stop, because we want to take them all the way to solve. We want to tell them why they're wrong, why everything they thought they knew was absolutely wrong, because that's what we're all taught to do, to be convincing. It's just not the case. If you want to be convincing, you have to stop.
Because we're never making up their mind for them. They're making that decision. What we want to do is get them to the point, you call it the cliffhanger, where they make that, they have the new insight and they make a new choice. It's their choice. I say, as leaders, we are in the choosing business. How do we help people make a different choice? There's so many other things that we could talk about. But Chip, before we sort of move into the last portion of our conversation, I want you to talk briefly about perhaps my favorite chapter title of all time. And I can't tell you how many thousands of books I've read, but what you can learn from convincing from magicians, con artists, and fortune tellers. You're really talking about cold reading a little bit. Can you just talk about that just briefly?
Yeah.
I mean, I've read about cold reading before, and I know that all of those people do cold reading, but that is a chapter title, friends.
I fought for that chapter title. They were like, well, I don't know if it makes sense. I mean, they were going to stick this in. I'm like, we have to. It's great.
And that's exactly right. And that's one of the things that when Adele and I were researching, like, who are the most convincing people, Adele goes, fortune tellers. Fortune tellers are extremely convincing, because
I am guessing, Chip, that you have not been to many fortune tellers in your life.
I am not. And neither is Adele, although she's got a great story for another time, but with Madame Marie, in fact. But the
it's
idea
in the book.
here,
Everybody, you just have to buy the book. It's
you got to buy the book.
Get the book.
is that, they are experts at pulling information out, and that's similar to what I did in the FBI, is that a lot of times all you're doing is setting them up so that they want to share. And they'll start with some overall kind of like things like, gosh, I'm seeing a sick relative. Am I getting warm? And, who doesn't have a sick relative, And so it just kind of builds from there. And after a while, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this person knows so much about me. They must be in touch with that ether out there. No, they're just really good at letting you talk and wanting you to share more information about you. So whether it's the kind of clothes you wear, they make a comment about your lifestyle, or, you're coughing a lot, maybe they're going to say something about your health. So that's the idea. And, con artists do this as well. Anybody that's practiced at doing that split second read, to get you to do something for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And cold reading is so much about like just saying what's called foyer statements, or what we call in the book predictive statements, right? And you make statements about someone, you're sort of guessing, right? You're using some initial information that you might get when you just first meet them, with the way they dress, with the way they look, with the way they talk, right? I mean, you're making some snap judgments, but predictive statements give you the ability to sort of guess politely, you have an enormous amount of untapped potential that's yet to be discovered. And I just stop. Now, most people are like, I do have untapped potential. I am.
How did you know? You're so darn smart, Adele.
Oh, right? You must be a psychic. And I'm going to tell you about what my potential is. And some people are like, well, I don't know if I would say anything. And it's like, you'd have to say something, because everybody thinks that people don't understand what they really are about, and they want to fill in the blanks for people. They want to be understood. And when I first brought this up to Chip, I was like, come on, like, as an FBI special agent, you must have used some of these predictive statements in your interrogations. And that was a bit of a conversation. He's like, well, I don't know about that. But Chip, can you give an example of how you use
Well,
this?
yeah, it's about mitigation, I think, and that's somewhat of a corollary to what we're talking about here. Is that, you know, when somebody's done, you know, if they were sitting across from me, they've done something heinous, and it was my job to get them to describe it, you know, to degrees so I can put that in my report and so forth. But nobody wants to fess up to that, right? Nobody wants to actually go over those things unless, you know, you've got some completely different issues. But
Right.
right, but for most of us is, you know, we sit, you know, when we're in judgment and thinking about our future lives, you know, it behind bars and so forth, we're trying to, you know, scramble and so forth, and we want to hide. So my job is to bring it out, to bring that person out of that hiding. And so one of the things is to start off, let's say it's completely heinous crime, murder, something like that, and say, you know, I just want you to know, after a while, after I've talked to the person, and we've been sitting for a while, I'll say something like that is, you know, I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of bad people. And I just want you to know that after getting a sense of who you are and what you are, I got to tell you, you're not a bad person. And I just let that hang. And so what they're going to say, their natural inclination is, right. Yeah. I mean, you know, these factors were determining what I had and what I did. They made me do this. The circumstances.
I had no
right?
choice, right?
You offer that again. All that is a part of those kind of statements. Yeah.
So I do need for us to start to move to the end, because this isn't your entire masterclass, right? This is just a little snippet for everybody. We were talking with Adele Gambardella and Chip Massey about their book Convince Me, which hopefully I have been helpful in convincing you to go get a copy of. But before we go, I want to know a couple of other things. And the first is, like, I'm suggesting that everyone reads your book, but I'm curious what each of you have read yourselves recently.
Yeah. So one of the really hot business books out there right now is Atomic Habits. And it's a great book. It's written really well. It's worth people picking up. And I think if you could use our book and Atomic Habits together, you would be really much more persuasive in maybe less than 30 days. So check out those two books together. And I think, you might have some good luck.
All right, Chip.
Yeah, and I also just want to say one point here, Kevin. Folks, if you haven't checked out who Kevin is, I urge you to do so. He's written a plethora of books. He does tremendous coaching and leadership sessions. You know, in my life, I wish coming up I had somebody like Kevin who is steady at the helm. That's what you want, right? When you are starting out in your career or you're mid-level or wherever you are, you really want somebody who's been there, done that, and can help you, you know, around the way. So I just put that out there. The book that I'm reading right now, you know, because it's hey, we're talking about warmer weather right now, is the Kobe Bryant, the Mamba Mentality. I love all the fascination around that time period where, you know, these guys were the best, like, you know, Jordan and Worthy and Kobe. But the mindset of winning, I think is just really interesting to me.
We will have both of those in the show notes for you, along with, of course, Convince Me by Chip and Adele. So tell me, one of you, where we can find out more about you, learn about what you're up to, get connected with you. Where do you want to point people before we finish up?
Yeah, well, follow us on Instagram at convincingco_. That'd be great. Just follow us there. Obviously, we could
Not hard to find at all.
No. And then the other thing is, you want to go to our website called trainingsogood.com. We are going to be launching a series of masterclasses and online classes that people can sign up for and learn all about these different techniques. And we're super excited to point you over there.
trainingsogood.com. You can follow them, of course. Go find them on LinkedIn as well, and their company. I said it at the start, I'll say it again: the Convincing Company, or convincingcompany.com. Now, before we go, everybody, I want to thank you guys for being here. But before we go, I want to ask all of you who are watching or listening a question, the one I ask you every single week. If you've been here before, you know, and here it is. Now what? What are you going to do with what you just learned? You may have noticed if you're watching that I was taking notes as we went about the things that I thought were especially helpful to me. I hope you were doing the same, even if it was only mentally. But writing a note is one thing. Taking an action is far more important. And so my challenge to you is, what are you going to act on as a result of being here? Certainly, I would highly encourage you to go get a copy of Convince Me, the book. But you got ideas in these 30 minutes that can help you, right? To help you think about how you tap into fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We talked about the convincing continuum. We talked about forensic listening. We talked about a whole variety of things. Like, how could you use those things to be more effective in your work as an influencer, as a persuader, as a communicator, as a leader today? So I will leave you with that. And I want to thank, again, I want to thank you, Adele, and you, Chip, for being here. It was such a pleasure for us to finally have this conversation. And I want to hope that all of you will come back again. And as I promised at the beginning, I was going to give away a copy to the people who were here live. So, which means if you're on the podcast, I do this sometimes, right? So you might want to start showing up for the lives. And the winner is Christina Rowe. So Christina, I will be connecting with you on LinkedIn and making sure we get you a copy of this book, not my copy, but the other copy that I have here. And we'll do that in the next day or so. All of you can congratulate Christina, and you can all make sure that you're subscribed and liking and doing all the stuff you do with podcasts so that you come back next week and not miss another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.